Wonderful. We have a full house today, as always. So I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of Atlantic Council and also myself and my team. It is wonderful to see, familiar, faces here, new friends, colleagues, and with this opportunity, I would like to kick off our event and starting officially. So, distinguished guests, and also it is wonderful to have the Deputy Minister of Trade of Turkey with us today. So, welcome, sir, and it's an honor to have you. And distinguished ambassadors and colleagues, we would like to have you to enjoy this session and learn from each other and try to engage as much as possible. And please don't be shy with the questions. And it is and today we will talk about Charles' report. My colleague Charles from Washington, D.C., he wrote an excellent report on Turkey in the new global trade order. And we will talk about this in the session. And we have also a wonderful lineup of panelists. I am Defne Arslan, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council Turkey programs. And today we will discuss global landscape, what are the changes in the new era, and how Trump administration affected every one of us. And and our report, as I said, authored by my colleague Charles Litchfield from Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center, which explores the changing environment and spotlights Turkey's position in the new world order, analyzing opportunities and challenges facing the country. I thought that this is important to discuss this and to come up with such a report because Turkey is a major trading partner for the EU. And it's not only about EU-US, but it also involves Turkey a lot. And also how this will affect, also the supply chain. So we will all discuss this later on. And I also like to announce that as Atlantic Council Turkey program, we are launching a programming on trade to study and address the latest developments through reports and convening and such as. And with this aim, we also welcomed Mark Murray, whom I will introduce soon to our team as a senior fellow. So I'm really proud to bring together an impressive audience of policymakers, diplomats, and business leaders to discuss its future economic relations and trade. It is, of course, always a pleasure to be here in Brussels. I really like Brussels. It's one of my favorite towns. I don't know about you, but I really like it. And the capital of EU, a fitting location, I think, to launch our report, given the importance of the transatlantic economic relationship and partnership. A topic high on the agenda here and also in Washington. Yesterday, we just had the Geoeconomics Forum here in this hotel, where we also had a lot of discussion on this topic with my colleagues. It was also another full house. So, as that, I would like to extend my special thanks to Limak Holding Chairperson and Atlantic Council International Advisory Board Member, Ebru Özdemir, for her continued support and vision. Ebru, we cannot do this without you, and it's wonderful always cooperate with you. And of course, Ambassador Volkan Bey, so it's always great to have you. So, I would like to remind everyone that today's discussion is under record and is being recorded, so afterwards you can also watch everything online. We really would like to encourage every one of you to engage with us on X and LinkedIn, if possible timely, and you can see on the screen, just our, X address and LinkedIn profile. So before we get into our panel discussion, it is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Mr. Mustafa Tuzcu, Deputy Minister of Trade of the Republic of Turkey. Deputy Minister also served as the Chief Trade Counsel and Chairman of the Committee on Safeguards at the World Trade Organization before he was appointed as the minister. It is a wonderful opportunity to have him here to kick off the event and also share us Turkey's position on the topic. Deputy Minister, thank you for joining us, and floor is yours. Please join me. Tamam.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, it's a pleasure for me to be here as a part of this gathering. I'd like to thank Atlantic Council to invite me in this very special occasion for the launch of this special report. So it's good to be here, and it's very timely for me because as the new global trade is a concern, there are a couple of capitals involved in this global turbulence. One is Beijing, the second is Washington, D.C., and the third one is Brussels, after Ankara. For me, these three capitals are on the spot, and I'm lucky that in the last 1 month, I've been first to Beijing, then to D.C. last week, meeting with USTR, Deputy USTR, and we had these negotiations with them, and today I'm in Brussels. So I'm just talking from the heart of these tensions. But since we heard the disclaimer from Defne Hanım, it is under records, so I will be limiting my interventions to some official remarks. But again, you are going to have some hints from my maybe humble interventions. My main topic is, of course, is going to include here the new parameters of the global trade environment first, and then I will focus on Turkey's challenges and opportunities in this new era. And third, also, I will talk about the strengthening partnership between the EU and Turkey and possible opportunities for enhancing cooperation between EU and Turkey and why it is important. So at the beginning, at the outset, I will just share with you, which is not a secret, that the global trade has entered a period of structural change and heightened uncertainty. 2 weeks ago, EU President von der Leyen just announced, gave the State Union statement, and in his statement, I'm sure that you are all familiar about this State Union remarks. The remark starts with a sentence. It says that Europe is in a fight. So it is very important, and this fight is not a literal fight. Fight is many global fields, and economy, trade, and others are included here. So the State of Union of von der Leyen underlines the process in global economy is also not in good shape, and all actors are in a midst of uncertainty. And unfortunately, also growing mistrust also poisons international cooperation. Here, under this global economic fragmentation, of course, China, United States, and the EU at the core of this structural global change, but also they are also affected by the results of this uncertainty. Here, as UNCTAD tells us very recently, uncertainty itself is the highest tariff possible. So that's the main cost is stemming from uncertainty itself. It's not because of tariffs we have. And for trade, I think the first principle is the predictability, which also is the core principle of WTO, World Trade Organization, established in 1990s. So here we lost the basis of global cooperation for many players. And second, we also lost the predictability in global scale. I also will not underestimate that it's not only a preference of Trump administration. The change has started a bit earlier, even in the first period of Trump, even during the last period of Obama in the United States. We have seen that the global changes in the trade, especially the new players, the rise of Asia in global trade, and also the new technologies, digitalization, and of course overcapacity and the subsidies, subsidies have become the heart of this discussion. So we shouldn't consider that we are new in this story. So here we have to emphasize that it's not the invention of Trump administration. We inherit this from past, and it is not an issue only for the US administration, for other countries too. Here, of course, we can discuss the nature of solutions. Some countries try to resolve this through tariffs. Some other countries put more protectionist measures. But at the end of the day, we have to admit that the system has to be fixed. And if multilateral ways are not found here, other members, other countries are trying to figure out new and creative options which are also undermining our current system. It's why the European Union last year with Draghi report put its competition compass at the forefront of its agenda, which also mentions about the changes, and of course also it underlines the insufficient capability of the EU on ongoing trade environment. Here, what EU put under the competition compass, the first is the innovation gap. The gap, when we mention about this, the gap is not with all the world, maybe. EU is, compared to some other countries, in good shape. But when it comes to the distance from the Asian countries, there is a growing innovation gap for the EU. So it is the first principle for the EU. The second is, of course, the dependency on defense and energy sources. Here also, the EU has to figure out, add some extra sources to also have independent on energy and defense. Of course, the third one is green transformation, which is an outstanding item, of course, in the EU agenda, but this time it came back to agenda as a changing rhetoric. It is now seeking to have a balance between green transformation and competition, which is more realistic and more doable. It's why, because in the first hand, the EU was seeking an ambitious goal to transform the industry, but then discovered that it also, if we don't have a gradual way, if we don't plan the transformation, the adaptation timely, it's going to have some costs for the EU and especially for the EU industry. So competition and the Green Deal has to have a deal, so a balance. Here we have these three items. On the other side also, the US pursues this America First trade and investment policies, and also it also directly linking trade to national security. Actually, it is also not very different than the EU's principle. So when we single out the US, we have to be careful about this. Maybe the language is different, but also we see the same concerns in the EU side too. It's why I refer to the statement of von der Leyen at the beginning of September. So linking trade to national security, and also like the EU, US also tried to reshore the industrial production, calling investment back from Asia to the United States. Even it doesn't want their investors to locate their investments in the friendly countries. So it's not only China or Vietnam, even other countries. They call them to come back. Also on the China side, we see also Made in China 2025 policy, and also the dual circulation strategy is also there. China is pursuing also an ambitious trade and industrial policy, which is also taking into consideration of the changes in the EU and the US, and try to adapt itself in the current period. And here we can see that the production in China is also shifting to other countries in Asia. They are also trying to bring their investments other countries too. And also they also call others to sell, to have some market access in China, because it is unsustainable also for China, because all other countries are shaming China for having all investments and trade in their hands. So China is also reshaping its industrial policy and trade policy. And here also they put an extra emphasis on technology and also renewables. Here we see that the progress in China on renewables and green transformation is also in very fast, and even faster than many developed countries. Having said that, all these countries, with their protectionist also measures, at the end of the day, turning the economic prosperity and the global trade into a zero-sum game. At one point, of course, it's going to affect the global growth in trade and also in global economy. We see this in the figures of WTO and IMF. It's going to cost us, including Turkey and other emerging economies. It's going to have effect on all of us. Having said that, also Turkey is preparing itself for this. Of course, we have negotiations with the EU on trade. We have trade dialogue, and today we are here also for climate dialogue. We try to continue our cooperation with the EU, which represents almost 40% of our exports, and we are also fifth biggest source for destination for the EU exports. We try with the EU Commission to keep the momentum strong and to open other chapters also in dialogue. Here, trust also, we are trying to build the trust between EU and Turkey. We have some positive feedback in recent 1.5 years, especially on trade, and we are trying to just decrease the numbers of trade irritants in our trade. And here I have 3 priorities in our relations. First, climate. Actually, these are also, I just had a look in the Atlantic Council report. And in the report also, it has some similar also priority for our relations too. So on climate, it's important part of our relations. We have become a part of Paris Agreement. We have now our own climate law recently, and we are now trying to draft our emission trading system. In addition to that, also our ministry is also has the task of having the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Second, also, it is important to have also a cooperation on digitalization, which is the new area all countries, not only Turkey, all other emerging countries have to focus on. It is a very critical task to narrow the gap, like I mentioned with the EU, with the Asia, especially on AI and also other technologies. And the third one, of course, the security and defense. Here also we have a good cooperation with the EU, and we are trying to underline and increase our cooperation. With the United States, with the current government, we are having a very good cooperation. And I was also in the delegation with my president to DC. It's not easy for trade side. Of course, we have some unresolved issues with regard to trade, but we don't want to link them with wider discussion, and we want to have a balanced trade relations. Here, with our LNG and aircraft cooperation is going to be also a stepping stone to advance our economic relations. In October, we are going to have also our continuing discussions with them on the current trade tariff policy of the US. But we have to, apart from these negotiations with the EU, with others, we have to bring back our multilateral trading system. As a trading nation, we don't see any other option. As I said at the beginning, predictability is our key to advance our relations. So bilaterals are not cure to solve all the pending issues. And reciprocal deals may serve for today, but reciprocity means a subjectivity at the end of the day. So we cannot rest on this subjective basis. So we have to build a stronger relations. With this, I'm trying to finish in my time because I do have, I think, 5 minutes. But here, I'd like to stress that in this fragmented world, we need to increase our competitiveness, and we cannot do this alone as only country. We need partnerships. And as we're celebrating the 30th year of anniversary with customs union with the EU, we think that the EU and Turkey relations should be elevated into new heights. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me and to be part of this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deputy Minister. Now inviting the panel to take to the stage Defne Hanım, Ebru Hanım, Dan, Mark, Charles.
Mr. Deputy Minister, thank you again for this insightful remarks on Turkey's position vis-à-vis EU and United States. Since you will not be staying because of your tight schedule till end of this panel, so I still like to give the opportunity to the audience if they may have any questions before we kick off the panel. And if not, then we will start our panel with our distinguished panelists. So just... Question. Not at the moment, maybe later. So thank you very much. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists. So today, again, I'm very delighted to be joined by Limak Holding Chairperson and Atlantic Council Advisory Board Member Ebru Özdemir. Thank you. Welcome. Atlantic Council Turkey Program Non-Resident Senior Fellow and former Deputy Assistant U.S. Trade Representative Mark Maury. Mark, welcome. Atlantic Council Europe and Geo-Economic Center Non-Resident Senior Fellow and former Assistant U.S. Trade Representative Daniel Maleni. Dan, welcome. And last and not the least, our author, Atlantic Council Geoeconomics Director for Economic Foresight and Analysis, and Boyden Gray Senior Fellow. And author of the report, famous Charles Litchfield. Charles, again, I mean, you did a great job, so thank you. Great report. I really enjoyed it, reading. I learned a lot. And if I may, I'd like to start with you. To start with, you know, in case our audience didn't have the chance to see the report, by the way, it will be published, but you can all scan the, the report from the QRs, which we left on the table. Could you give us a brief outline of the report and what we should take from the report and why we work on this report, just so floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daphne, for that kind introduction. Not famous yet, although I did discover in preparing today that the report is already in ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT a question, just verifying I got my information right, and saw the report quoted back at me. So that's I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but it's entertaining. So thank you also for the opportunity to research this report. I've been following the Turkish economy for a long time. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to write something of this length on Turkish trade, and discovered some things that are very reassuring about the future, and then some things that are a little bit more concerning as Turkey tries to rebalance its trade. And I think a lot of the policies that we currently observe in Turkey are the right ones. But the environment for trade is not good. And this is not Turkey's fault, but it's something that the EU and Turkey, as a partner of the EU, have to face. And this is partly to do with the uncertainty coming from the US. I think that's very clear, but this isn't the only factor. You just have to look at data. The last time that Turkey tried to increase prosperity and financial stability using trade as a means to do this, the last time it did that, the environment for trade was quite positive. Trade was growing faster than global GDP. This time, it's the opposite. Trade is holding back the growth of global GDP. Trade is fragmenting. This doesn't mean that Turkey's current goals are impossible, but it makes it more difficult. It also means that Turkey can't rely on some of the advantages it's always had. So Turkey has an amazing location between different trading blocs. It's quite well integrated with the EU, although that could always be better. It has good relations and good logistical connections to fast-growing economies, but we now know this isn't enough. Turkish public opinion and officials were surprised and maybe upset to discover that they weren't part of the IMEC route that President Trump has backed. Now, of course, there are other routes, and there's Belt and Road, which Turkey has played an important role in, also very important trade routes with Iraq and the Caucasus. But geography can't be taken for granted anymore. I think that's an important point. And then on Turkey and multilateral trade, it was reassuring to hear the Deputy Minister talk about Turkey's stance, which seems to be, I think, the right one. But not everyone has those beliefs. Other countries operate in a different way. I mean, the elephant in the room is, of course, the US, but it isn't just about the US. Turkey has had to adapt also to Chinese overcapacity and is doing things that have now led to different disputes in the WTO, as it should be. But it's a much more aggressive environment than the last time Turkey really turned to trade and tried to improve its situation through trade. So those are the points I'd make. I mean, high-tech exports are not a large part of Turkey's exports. So high-tech is not a large proportion of Turkey's exports. I think it's under 5%. There's a very impressive strategy to increase that number, but I think that will take partnerships with firms, American, European. And the American and European firms look for certainty in Turkey when they make their investment decisions. This hasn't always been the case. I think the current policy mix is more reassuring, but the report ends on some points to do with the institutional framework on transparency, which I think are very important to attract new investment and attract the partnerships, because Turkish firms have a lot to offer, but I think to make a rapid leap into exporting higher technology manufacturing, partnerships are going to be necessary. So that's when the institutions come in, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. We will continue. But from you, I really like to turn to Dan. because I think it could be, to start with, interesting to get your, just an overview of EU-US trade talks, in this new era, just before we are getting specifically, just to Turkish topics. So if you may, and you have a great insight on that, so if you can enlighten us and our audience.
Sure. I think the overall context is, first of all, when the Trump administration came in, there was a lot of uncertainty about whether Europe was going to have, 10% tariffs, 200% tariffs. There was a lot of volatility. I think what we've learned is that deals with this administration are possible if you can sit down and try to find common ground and sort of meet the administration where it is, because the EU, ended up with a strong priority of engagement, and they ended up with a deal which I think was relatively good compared to many of the other partners. So I think that's one of the lessons here, maybe for Turkey and for others. I think the other lesson is that the deals that are being made now aren't like the old deals, where it was like you sign the deal and you were finished, one and done. What we have are framework deals that are much more dynamic. I mean, there will be continued conversations when you have the deal. It has, as the Deputy Minister mentioned, the importance of predictability. It has lent an air of predictability, but there's also a certain amount of dynamism. There's a continued discussion. And I think it's worth looking at the US-EU deal in terms of what is the dynamism, what are the points of further discussion in addition to tariffs. Tariffs make up about 3 paragraphs of the US-EU deal. They're the headline numbers, of course, because they attract a lot of attention, but there are 3 paragraphs. There were more than 10 paragraphs on regulatory barriers to trade, standards-related barriers, other non-tariff barriers, which are going to be I think subject to further discussion and maybe further improvement of the arrangements. And I think that focus also exists with respect to the US deal with the UK, and I think will be an element of any engagement the United States has around the world, be looking at these non-tariff barriers and how they can be part of the discussion. I think the other aspect of these deals, and I include the UK deal and the EU deal, is the extent to which cooperation on non-market economy policies and practices coming out of China, excess capacity, intellectual property theft, various other problematic practices. And I think there will be, going forward, in these deals that the US does and continues to work on with the EU and Turkey and others, there will be a focus on collaboration and coordination on some of these issues having to do with China. So I think that's an important aspect. And I think some of the action that Turkey has taken recently, and some of your comments, Mr. Deputy Minister, about the challenges coming out of China, I think are really important. I think the other aspect is you're looking at the elements of growth in trade, which Charles deals with in the report. Turkey does not have a huge problem with a huge goods surplus with the United States. So that's helpful. So there's room for growth there that would not be antagonistic. Turkey also has, if I understand from Charles's report correctly, a strong presence in the services area. And of course, this administration doesn't really focus very much on the services trade. You can argue about whether that's the right thing, the wrong thing, but the truth is that there is room to expand services trade with the United States in a way that won't create antagonisms in the same way that you might have with goods, for instance. I think the fourth observation that I have about the US-EU deal and its relevance is the extent to which the EU and the UK and other trading partners are reacting to the US actions by trying to build up relations with other countries. We heard Maroš Šefčovič, the trade commissioner, yesterday, and other commissioners emphasizing that, yes, the United States is important, but it's basically 20% of our trade, and 80% of our trade is with non-US parties. So I think this is maybe an opportunity for others outside the US to work together and build markets with other third countries. And I think that trend, maybe unfortunately for the United States, maybe fortunately for others, will probably continue to be the case. That the receptivity on the part of other trading partners to increase trade and integration, I think, will be greater. One final aspect, and then I'll stop, is, in the many years I worked with the EU and with Turkey and working with Mark on Turkey, we always said with respect to Turkey that we needed to have a trading relationship that kept pace with our political and military relationship, that those relationships were way out ahead and trade was lagging. And I think one of the hallmarks of this administration is that they do take a holistic approach to the relations. The trade is not siloed from military, it's not siloed from political, so it's all in one bundle. So I think that also then creates opportunities to advance the interests in political and the military area in a way that will also promote trade. So those are my five observations, lessons one can draw maybe from the US-EU deal.
Thank you very much, Dan. Extremely useful. Before coming to Ebru Hanım, I'd like to turn to Dan, whom I know for many years now. I will not tell you how many years, then you will guess my age. But just we worked quite a lot in the past, in my previous capacity as well. And at that point, we were all talking about QRZs, and GSP, right? Just a lot of things. And Mark, so if I may, you are one of the true experts also, in the U.S. On U.S.-Turkey trade relationship. So we are also now. It started during the first Trump administration. Now we are still talking about this 100 billion bilateral trade goal between two countries. That. As also Charles stated in his report, it's still, we have a long way to go to make it 100. Even the Boeing sales or LNG sales, will help, but not sufficient to get there. So what do you think? What additional steps that both countries need to take, to accelerate this trade volume goal? So, and what is the trick? Whether it can be a balanced trade or not? Because it looks like the way it goes, it will be more in favor of the United States. So,
well,
you have the difficult question. Sorry,
that's an easy one. Thank you so much. No, thank you, Deputy. Thank you to the Council for this opportunity. I always love coming to Brussels. This is the first time Dan and I have been able to share a stage since we both left government. Interesting topics to try to focus on. I think Charles's report lays out most of the key issues that we all have to deal with in trying to improve the U.S.-Turkey relationship. But I want to go back further. I want to go back even before the first Trump administration. And when I first started working on Turkey full time, it was about the same time the Obama administration came in, and we had the now famous Obama-Erdogan declaration that there should be this elevation of the relationship in commercial affairs to match that in political and defense affairs. And we tried very hard. We tried very hard to try to get U.S. companies interested in Turkey and the opposite direction. And we found that even with the best will in the world, it is not easy when you don't have two business communities that have intimate knowledge of each other and some natural reason to try to collaborate. Governments can only do so much. There continues to be a strong relationship amongst defense companies on both sides. In the energy sector, absolutely. Turkish Airlines has become a global force and is present in the U.S. as well as everywhere else. And so there are those built-in advantages, I guess, to build on. But getting other companies involved, getting other companies to either invest in or trade with the other side is a matter of both governments taking the steps necessary to streamline their own regulations, to introduce companies to each other, to try to respond to those needs, the company's needs, to make the relationship grow. That proved quite difficult, and it has remained difficult ever since. For many of the reasons Dan has discussed with respect to the U.S.-EU relationship, overcoming some of those hurdles remains quite challenging for both the U.S. and Turkey. The ability to get an improvement in the quality of the relationship, to bring in high-tech companies from the Turkish side, for example, into the picture. It's going to require a lot of work and a lot of flexibility on both sides. One thing Charles' report mentions, but there isn't time to go into it in detail in that context, is FDI into Turkey has been lagging in recent years. There are lots of reasons for this, of course, but I think that it shows that in Turkey's side, if it wants to make trade a key part of its economic recovery and expansion, there has to be a better relationship with high-tech firms, a lot of which are American, of course, and to bring them into the picture and to increase collaboration with quite remarkable Turkish firms in this sector, but smaller ones. So this is, I think, for both sides, a key part of trying to get the quality of the relationship changed for the better. $100 billion from roughly where we've been, around $20 billion or so in two-way goods trade over the last several years, is a tall order. In an environment where the trading environment has become quite different from what it was, it's going to take a lot of work.
Thank you. That's fine.
I'm glad I solved that for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. From here, looks like Deputy Minister is leaving us. So, of course, yeah. So, thank you again for joining us. And, yeah. So we had to start a bit late because we were waiting for the Deputy Minister, so apologies for that. So after the first round of questions, I will, just refer to you for your questions until before we start the second round here. So Ibrahim, so I'd like to very quickly turn to you well, you are, leading one of Turkey's, and also not only in Turkey but also globally, acclaimed a company that we are very active in infrastructure, in construction, in energy, just many other fields. And the report highlights the Turkish construction contractors are a global force. Is second only to China's and contribute to a positive trade surplus in services as well. Given the goal to revive Turkish manufacturing and reduce the overall trade deficit in Turkey, how can this impressive success in the construction and the other work be more effective leverage to drive demand for domestically produced goods? And also on the top of that, I also like to get your take how Section 232, which is on steel, is affecting the market in Turkey. Even though Turkish, by the way, the Trump administration tax level overall Turkish products are around 15% now, but except steel, which is still at 50%, which is across the board, and it is really affecting the way a lot of producers in Turkey as well. So, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you and also the Grady and Atlantic Council Turkey program for this collaboration, because I'm very happy to collaborate on different aspects, and right now trade is the most important and most important subject on the agenda. And thank you, Charles. Nice to meet you. It was a great report. And I'm not an expert, by the way, like this gentleman here, nor an author. I'm just talking from the business experience. And actually, everything is more experience-driven. What we live every day is going to be my answer. So we are in construction sector, and the construction sector has been changed dramatically. And it's kind of a locomotive sector where you also pull out and bring a lot of suppliers and subcontractors with you to the other countries. So when you are building something or performing a project outside your own country, this time Turkey, you bring many suppliers that these suppliers cannot reach themselves. And because of the size, like if I give you an example very easily, I'm like a door. A door producer cannot export 1,000 of them, but in a big project, what we do is we export with them. We bring them a very big market they may not be able to reach, in a country they may not be able to go. So this is a very important sector that I think this model has to be probably should be resembled or should be taken as an example in other sectors as well, as this is an opening a real big market. Maybe if we are working in US, then these companies, these suppliers, subcontractors, blue collar, white collar can go out with us. So it also becomes a service exports. So it has a really exponential effect, the sector we are in, that in the exports that Turkey is working. And the other important thing is also we are strong in this sector. I mean, if you look at the NR report, Engineering News Record, which is like the Bible of our industry, the Turkish companies is the maximum number of has the maximum number of companies in this report, and we are actually really competing with China. So as China is dominating major sectors, I mean, they have enormous surplus in most of the sectors. In the construction, I think we are really big sectors that we are really working and we are competing a lot. And I think right now the idea that every country can be successful in every sector has changed. I think now countries should choose what they are good at, and what Turkey is good at, for example, I would say, is construction. So we have to add more power to this. I mean, if you are strong in something, then, and if you have the strength to bring out with you suppliers and all the industries in your country, then I think construction should be one of the key sectors that Turkey should be active on. And regarding the steel question, as the minister said, I mean, I think the highest risk or the highest the tariff would be the unpredictability. So because we invest and we invest long term. So when I give a price for or an offer for a project, I count in the steel prices. So I cannot give a price with a steel where the steel and the cement are the most important items in the projects of the construction sector. It's very hard to predict what the prices will be with these differentiating steel prices. So with 50% margins, of course, makes Turkish exporters or puts Turkish exporters in a very difficult position. So with these amounts, I mean, it's impossible to export to the United States. So the exporters have to find other countries to export. So currently, I think the traders and the producers are struggling to export to US. So right now, I'm hearing that they're looking for other countries to make these exports to.
Thank you very much. I have questions for each one of you, but given that we are a bit more tight in time, I also like to look at the audience in case we may take some questions, and then I will continue with my questions myself. So, yes, Kadri Bey, I see over there. Please introduce yourself, and before, just...
Hello, thank you very much for this opportunity. Kadri Taştan, I'm with the TOB in Brussels and also with the GMF. Actually, my question will not be directly, and congratulations for the report on Turkey, but as we see how Trump administration is seeing, the investment and trying to attract the investment mostly for the U.S. One thing that I am curious to hear from our American colleagues is how this affecting U.S. U.S. companies' decision to go to invest in other countries. Do you see this kind of trends, and as particularly the countries like Turkey, how it can, in which direction it can affect? Do you have any insight on this? I would be really curious to hear. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll start, but I think our colleagues formerly of the US government should also answer. What I'd say for the moment, it's too early to tell. What we don't see for now is the logic of encouraging firms to invest in the US to avoid the tariffs. That's one of the sort of pillars of the Trump policy, that if you can be a firm from wherever in the world, except if there are some national security concerns, but otherwise you can invest in the US and then you don't have to pay the tariff. And I have not seen a takeoff of those investments yet. There have been some big headline announcements which the administration has been proud to parade around, but there haven't been that many. And I think one of the factors there is the uncertainty around inputs, because the dollar is depreciated, so it should be an attractive time to be investing, but there's still too much uncertainty over inputs. The administration does say, we may be able to do a deal. If you invest, then you will get a lower tariff or no tariff at all on some of the things you need to bring in to produce. But we haven't seen that. And then in the other direction, US firms investing, again, too early to tell, but I think that's been pretty much stable. So the balance has not shifted in the direction that the administration wants for now.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think there are a lot of firms in particular sectors that are under examination that are considering new investments that they might have considered abroad, and thinking maybe they should bring those to the United States. We've seen some examples of that in the pharmaceutical area, but there are countervailing considerations, as Charles said, about input prices and the uncertainty of investments in the United States. So. I think the companies that are now making investment decisions, if they're not one of the target sectors, I think they're still given even consideration to, and considering the many other factors that come into play with investment choice as to where they place their investment in the United States or abroad. So, it's not clear there's going to be a huge impact, except perhaps to say in some of those targeted sectors.
Charles, if I may, just so I'd like to turn to you before, just taking another. Maybe it is also time to talk about how this new global trade order will have an impact on the supply chain side, and how this can create also an opportunity for countries like Turkey, over countries, over China, for example. Okay,
Yes.
just.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that we do go into this in the report a little bit, and thank you for asking that question. And here the source of uncertainty isn't the US. It's China. It's also the fact there's a war going on very close to Turkey, sadly, which has meant that independently of what the US has done, and the US has added to the uncertainty, but because of the war, because of China's behavior, everyone is seeking to diversify their supply chains, also because of the experience of the pandemic. Everyone is seeking to diversify supply chains at the same time, and this is quite difficult when there are bottlenecks in the supply chains, or choke points, as a friend of the Atlantic Council calls them in his book. That's Eddie Fishman. So everyone is trying to diversify at the same time. It does mean there are opportunities for countries that happen to control, either within their soil or with refining capacities, some alternatives to what China can provide. Turkey is in this position. There are some critical minerals in its soil. The refining capacity isn't quite what it should be, and so there hopefully will be investments in that regard. But the problem is that everyone is trying to diversify at the same time. The EU has to diversify, and that this does create an opportunity for it to talk to Turkey. But I think there are so many things going on at the same time that it's sort of quite disconcerting for everyone, and also difficult for businesses to keep up and understand, well, this is the geopolitically sound investment that I might make rather than a geopolitically unwise one. The guidance just isn't very clear. But the point should be that there are opportunities for Turkey here as an ally of NATO. Most NATO member states are also part of the EU. I just think things are a little bit too uncertain, and the signals and incentives aren't really as aligned as they should be.
But I think just a small addition, with the Syria reconstruction, because we were last week in the US and there was a lot of talks about who's going to reconstruct in Syria. And in your also report, you said that it's going to have a certain sizable effect on Turkish GDP, because we have like 900 kilometers of border, and if Syria is going to be reconstructed, Syria is going to be a major partner.
Yep.
Of course, the same thing can be expected maybe in a longer term in Ukraine.
Yes.
The same thing is going to happen there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities.
There are opportunities, and then something else I should have said before, and sorry for interrupting, was that it's quite interesting to follow, and economists have managed to calculate this, the import dependency of Turkish exports. So we were talking about inputs a few minutes ago. This is the same thing, but a sort of more scientific term for them that economists have made up. And for a while, Turkey was moving in the right direction. So its exports were relying more and more relatively on domestically produced inputs. And then this started declining again because of that lack of FDI that we mentioned. Hopefully we managed to turn a corner with the current domestic normalization of economic policy, but it's too early to tell still. And the reason I'm hopeful about this, and it's really relative to the construction sector that Ebru talks about and knows very well, is that you really can see a logic of integration here. Turkey happens to have competitive advantages on white goods, on cement, on things that then flow into the services that Turkey exports. And so there is a happy story in some sectors, but I think we'd all like to see that generalized.
We have to be more competitive. I agree with you. I mean, especially with the technology and so forth. So yeah, there is a big room for there's a potential, but we have to really explore. Thank you. Sorry.
No. This is something that I want to comment actually. What with the construction sector and the export of services, I want to share an anecdote which I heard from a businessman. Actually, bidding for in the Gaza region for the tenders, temporary housing tenders that they were applying, held it by UN. Since we have the former, president of the UN secretary, with us, and literally, all the tenders are awarded to Chinese companies because literally they cannot compete with China as they have been subsidized, all these Chinese companies. So, I think this is an interesting anecdote that I wanted to share, and it's an important anecdote. So maybe we should tell this to President Trump, right? So where the taxpayers' money is going to China is getting all the tenders. So from there, actually, Ebru Hanım, I also like to turn you again, maybe we can also talk about this global trade fragmentation. So about Turkey, what do you see as the single most critical internal shift that needs to happen within Turkish firms so that you all can successfully transit towards an export-led and financially stable growth model, and hopefully less import-dependent exports. So what is it, magic story there? What we have to do?
I mean, this was actually the question that I want to answer. Actually, I wanted to add after you, because in your report you clearly stated kind of a roadmap, and we also question as the Turkish industry what we should do and what can we do better. Because what happened was most of our industries stayed in very traditional sectors and less value-added sectors, and like textiles, maybe some parts of construction where if it's not complex or an industrial construction, also it's not the sectors that we have to be in. We have to bring in more value-added sectors, which means we have to really modernize the way that we do things. We have to add more technology, and this is where partnerships are coming into picture. I mean, we can get technology from US. US has been a little bit kind of, as we have discussed, far from Turkey. They are more domestic or Latin America looking. Turkey was a little bit far from them, but definitely we have to have the technology transfer. We have to do new sectors like defense. Right now, defense is the rising star of Turkey. We have many interesting companies, small to medium-sized companies are doing a lot of exports, and I'm very hopeful in that sector, like construction. I think it's going to be next construction in the coming decade. And the other thing is, as I said, we have to focus on the sectors that we are good at, defense, construction, and others. And the other thing is the policy is the key. Now Turkey has already announced its medium-term investment plans, the government plans. So we have to stick to that plan. And inflation has been the problem. I mean, to keep the inflation low and going towards the target, of course, we had now less devaluation. So devaluation was not equal to inflation. So this caused some problems. And the imports became very cheap compared to exports. But I'm sure that putting more technology in the sectors and making our sectors more competitive, we can be more competitive in the coming years, where we have to be competitive because China is next door, as you said. We have to compete with Chinese where they have a surplus in most of the sectors that they're at. So, but we are, I mean, we have a good geographical location. We have very talented white collar. We have enormous amount of blue collar. So, you know, we can make this happen, I think.
And one other advantage that is mentioned in the report, and you've alluded to it with Syria and Ukraine, is that Turkish firms are, well, excuse the bold term, but ballsy. They are brave. They go into areas that I think Western firms usually think are too risky.
I
So
don't
the
want to
risk-
say that because I don't want to tell ourselves as courageous, but this is what we use in
But I
Turkey
think
as well.
you and others. I mean, this is Syria reconstruction seems obvious because it's it's next door, but in markets that are further afield, in construction projects, big infrastructure projects that I think other firms feel are too risky, Turkish firms are willing to go in first, which is impressive. And then finding a way to go in first, take the risk, have some reward from that risk, but then end up in a broader partnership, maybe with other firms, could be a good strategy.
Also, I think the fact that Turkey is not China, and is a bit of a selling point. You can be out there, you can be aggressive, and you can say, and furthermore, you know, you're in a much better position purchasing Turkish goods, Turkish services, because it's not, you know, you're not building on a dependency to China. So it's well worth.
Exactly.
It's a good selling point.
The other important aspect, just one sentence, is, I mean, as I'm in the construction sector, I see the Chinese working around in Africa, in GCC, in Middle East. I mean, the quality-wise, of course, I think Turkish quality is more sought for. But when, of course, you have to compare the price, we have some issues there. But the quality and the ability to perform on the budget and on time, I think the Turkish manufacturers are much braver.
Yeah. So we still need to talk customs union, renewal with Charles. And also, maybe I can also pose another question, both Dan and Mark, about, what is the possibility for Turkey signing a free trade agreement with the United States? Is because this is something that is being discussed in Turkey, but I'm not sure if this is being reflected on the US side that clearly. As an insider, you too, maybe you can give us a more realistic picture. Where are we with that?
I can start on customs union monetization, because I thought you were getting me to talk about something that was very unlikely, but then you talked about an FTA with the US. So there's actually more hope for customs union modernization, which seems sometimes a little bit is a frustrating topic, because the deal was done in 1995. Both economies have changed a lot. And I think a majority of goods still that are exchanged between the US and the EU fall under the customs union, but it's getting closer and closer to the point where it's less than half of goods that are exchanged under those terms, because agriculture is out, services are out, and we could go on. A lot of high tech is out as well. So On modernization, I think this is such a frustrating topic and a bit of a rabbit hole that I don't want to give anyone false hope. But I think that it's very encouraging that the high-level economic dialogue between the EU and Turkey is back on. They're meeting again. This came at the EU's request because the EU can see there's an obvious case for it. There has been a lot of political volatility that have made them impossible, but now the talks are back on. And so we need to focus on things that I wouldn't call them low-hanging fruit. They're difficult, but at least they're realistic and they would be transformational. On GDPR, Turkey has tried to pass legislation that is compatible, and yet it hasn't had a full recognition from the EU. I think that should be an important goal. On customs, carbon border adjustment mechanism, which the minister mentioned, the EU likes to say that this policy is important and doesn't really call for flexibility and sweetheart deals with countries. But as long as Turkey has an emissions trading system that is compatible, it doesn't for now, but if should that be done, then on the EU side there should be efforts to recognize that Turkey is a neighbor, it's an ally, and it can be an alternative source of critical minerals. So that should be another priority.
It's ironic that the closest I think Turkey came to being able to pursue an FTA with the United States was during the TTIP talks, and Dan can talk more about the evolution. But even before those talks began, Turkey had come to the conclusion that it really should seek the FTA with the United States, and there was little to no receptivity on the U.S. side. By that point, even under the Obama administration, the traditional FTA model was already being questioned. We did, under the Obama administration, negotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We tried very hard, Dan tried very hard to negotiate the TTIP agreement with the EU, but other efforts along those lines with other countries was largely discouraged. That was certainly true under the first Trump administration. I don't see any evidence now that's being revisited, so I think the idea of the traditional style FTA is not in the American toolkit anymore, at least for now. But Dan, I think we came reasonably close to getting something set up under TTIP that could have brought Turkey in.
Yeah, I think because of the customs union arrangement, where whatever we negotiated with the EU, Turkey would have to provide, and so we were definitely in discussions with Turkey about how whatever we negotiated with the EU, how that would apply to Turkey. I think Mark's right, and if you look at the current deals that the U.S. has done, say with the EU or the UK, I mean they're frameworks. As I said, it's a dynamic process. But if you look at all the elements, you have tariffs, then you have technical barriers to trade, then you have a series of sanitary and phytosanitary issues, and then you have intellectual property issues. And if you go down the list of all those different paragraphs of things that will be pursued dynamically in these agreements, the sum total starts looking like an FTA in terms of the subject matter. So I don't think in the near term we're going to have a big announcement of a comprehensive FTA per se. But what I could see is the kind of thing where it's like maybe if you want to call this a progressive FTA, where you've got all the elements in there and you're moving sequentially toward them. And I see that in the EU deal, I see that in the UK deal, and I could certainly see that in a subsequent deal that might be reached with Turkey. Again, especially in light of the rules of the customs union, which hasn't really come up in conversations with respect to the U.S.-EU deal, but if things advance, could.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Ambassador Volkan Bozkır, or a comment, please. Yeah.
As the former EU Minister and Chief Negotiator of Turkey, when EU is mentioned, I feel obliged to make some comments at least. First thing, it is the 64th year that we signed the association agreement with the European Union, 30th year that we signed the customs union, 20 years it is after we started negotiations. So it's a wonderful relation with the European Union. It shows how much patient, stubborn, tolerant, and decided we are in our relations with the European Union. I think what makes this still alive is that it's not like other institutions or organizations, UN, NATO, whatever organization it is. You go to meetings, prepare documents, and then you go back to your home. But EU is a life standard. It's your everyday life. So it affects the air you breathe, or the water you drink, your democracy or your economy. So that's why the people likes it from a different perspective. That's what keeps us in the European Union relations. So one EU commissioner who became president of a Baltic country once said, if the political climate is okay, he will become members in a few months. If the political climate is not there, then they say your tomatoes are not red enough or your salads are not green enough, so you wait for many years. So this is the first part. Second is the customs union you have mentioned. I think upgrading the customs union is not that easy that it looks like. You need to add agriculture, services, and public procurement, which are very difficult sectors which were neglected when we were signing the customs union. So perhaps I'm now dividing issues into two, a romantic look and realistic look. Romantic look is that we can upgrade the customs union tomorrow. Realistic is that we can't perhaps do it for decades, because it's very costly, and some countries even doesn't talk about dealing with agriculture and services. It's too large. Third issue, which is mentioned here also, is that the problem of customs union is if a country signs a free trade agreement with the European Union, it is not automatically affecting Turkey. Unfortunately, there is a missing element in the customs union agreement, which doesn't say whenever a third country signs an agreement with the European Union, it's automatically affecting Turkey. It doesn't there. So if a country signs a free trade agreement, automatically they become like an European Union country. So their exports to Turkey is zero, while Turkey's exports to that country is facing customs. It's the same thing with the United States also. So this hasn't been corrected, and whenever we want to sign a free trade agreement with that country also, they say, why should we sign it? Because we already have zero customs when we export to you. So there's a difficulty there. I just wanted to share this point with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I appreciate that. And I'd like to turn to the audience if we may have more questions, because we are wrapped, Ambassador, for it. Yeah.
I take the point and agree that Turkish construction companies have certain natural advantages in the region because they're bold, risk tolerance is higher, they're used to working in rough environments. I'm thinking specifically of Ukraine. That war will end. Turkey has certain natural advantages, but do you see, as a business person, do you see a potential problem because Turkey has, on the one hand, supplied Ukraine with drones and other materials and has been a good friend, and probably will play an important role in Black Sea security after the conflict ends? Those are pluses. On the other hand, Turkey has been a large customer for Russian energy, and even more, has been a supplier to Russia of some goods and technologies, both produced in Turkey, but more transiting as a third country transit point to Russia. The Ukrainians are keeping track of that. What's your sense of that balance, and how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, good question. First of all, I mean, I'm just going to answer this from the construction point of view, from the private sector. And currently, a lot of Turkish companies has already started working in Ukraine. And whichever country, like America, Korea, all other countries are coming to talk to us in Turkey to make partnerships and work in Ukraine, because all the Turkish construction industry was there before. And I don't think that it's gonna cause any problems, because Turkish companies were there when the war started. Most of the equipment stayed there, and then they left. So I feel like from all the interest of the third countries, Europeans plus Americans, even Koreans, are coming to Turkey, to the Constructors Association, to make partnerships to go to Ukraine after the war. I mean, because it's the same thing. It's naturally, it was our market, Ukraine. And Turkish, with the courageous and with the expertise, even the equipment stayed there, I think will be the first ones to make partnerships. But I think it's going to be partnerships. Turkey will not be doing this alone. Like in Syria. Currently, it's in Syria, for example, it started Qatari plus Turkish. Maybe even in Gaza afterwards, I mean. But this is, I don't think that it's going to cause any problems over there from the Turkish construction sector.
Okay.
Any other questions? Zeynep, you have one over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ceren Ergenç from Center for European Policy Studies. I would like to go back to the high-tech partnerships. That's, I think, the main point of the report, and link it back to the construction sector. Construction sector being the locomotive industry, as the business representative put it, but it is not the typical high-tech industry, right? So I wonder how to actually align these two, the need to partner up in high-tech and still double down on the construction industry, which is the competitive advantage of Turkey. I'm honestly a bit surprised at how China is depicted in this story as the cheap but low quality provider of construction, because it's actually, China actually is combining high tech and construction with data centers, solar plants, green LNG receiving stations, especially in the greater European area. So I wonder if there are prospects for such a roadmap for Turkey as well. We are talking about the reconstruction plans in Ukraine, Gaza, and Syria, and these are not my regional expertise, but I wonder if these constructions do include high-tech construction, like China does actually in the Middle East, for example. Thank you.
I'll take the question, or you want to add something?
I can
you go
give you a preamble on the recommendations in the report. I mean, yes, we do look at HIT 30, and a lot of it is promising, but realistically, you need partnerships. But it seems we agree at least on that part of the equation. One thing that I do try to say in the report is that there's a sort of thread that you can draw to make it work between what the advantages Turkey has, exporting services, and then trying to make sure that what goes into the provision of those services, it can't all be made in Turkey, but try to increase the percentage. And on that, I think in that effort, at least there are realistic prospects of that working. And you can break it down into different parts of what Turkey exports successfully as services, tourism, medical services, and then you have clusters of knowledge and know-how that should also mean that you have some manufacturing. So that was the point I was trying to make.
I think we can be, more technological, because I'm also the governor of the in the World Economic Forum in Engineering and Construction Group. So I know what the sector globally is like. So currently we are one of the least digitalized sectors. But however, the systematics of doing construction of complex projects are being changed a lot. And everything is becoming more pre-manufactured. It's like more, you manufacture it before and then you take it and then you install it. So it's like more Lego type things rather than, building on site. So this is also requiring a lot of technology in the sense that you combine all the designs beforehand with beam technology and so forth. So actually technology is being used, but because you see a lot of steel and concrete, you don't see it much. However, in the design phase, the technology is there. Regarding the Chinese, yes, they are huge on solar plants. I mean, in the solar panels, I think they killed all their competitors because they can produce cheap, and they can, they have a surplus. So everybody probably in the world is buying from the Chinese. And what I meant was on the more complex projects where you have to combine everything, you have to manufacture these things and putting all together. I think Turkish are a bit bigger on that sense from the quality and on-time purposes. But we do procure a lot from China as well. I mean, this is a little bit, now evolving in the sector, and this is on a big debate, how we can do the supply chain, how we can manage the supply chain in a better way using technology and using more pre-manufactured materials, and how we can do more circular, for example. This is the other topic that we are really working on.
Okay, last question, then we need to wrap up. Kadri, yes, this is your second, but that's okay. Since you are my friend, I'll give you an exception.
I didn't want to abuse, but if I understood well, I just wanted to share a view on the question about how the Ukrainian potentially could see the Turkey's involvement in the construction, given the balancing relations, right? If I understood well your question. I think very quickly inside on this, I mean, Turkish-Ukrainian relations on the defense industry is going before the war and is still going on. And I think the Ukrainians understand very well the Turkish position, that there is also this relation with Russia. So I think on this can be an example that on the construction, Ukrainian won't use this as a kind of feeling. It will not be a feeling that will affect negatively. What can be potentially, I think, as it's a bit like in the, at the European level now, there is those investments and different European programs to develop the defense, and there are some conditionalities. And we know that the Americans, they will not probably fund the reconstruction of Ukraine. It will be probably European Union, and then we should probably look at which kind of conditionality there will be, etc., which kind of program they will be put, because many European countries, they wouldn't like to see all this construction or other reconstruction matters going to the third countries. Just my opinion. Sorry, I didn't want to abuse.
But you're saying that this is not only Turkey, but the third countries, because the funds, they want to flow it back to Europe. But who is going to work on site on that country is going to be an issue. I mean, who is going to be the blue collar or the white collar is also another.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I am sure this question will come at some point. I mean,
it's going to be definitely partnerships. I mean, most of the thing, everything is now going on partnerships with EU or America.
Yeah. Thanks.
For example, we were working in, the reason I'm telling it the first hand is because we were building Dnipro metro in Ukraine. And we didn't believe that there was going to be a war there. And when the war started, we had to bring back all our people with their families, more than 300 people, by train to Romania, and then we flew them back to Turkey. And then all our equipment, all our site facilities were there. We supplied a lot of food for the people. I mean, everything is like, and they stayed in our camp facilities. So this is the reason we are not the only one. There are many Turkish companies left. So with the equipment stayed there, with the site facilities stayed there, with our Ukrainian people or the personnel lived there. So we will be the first ones to come back. That's for sure.
So thank you very much. To wrap up, I like to give an opportunity just to one last sentence to this wonderful panelists, just my guests. Maybe I can start with Ebru and then, Mark, Dan, and Charles
Like one sentence.
Yes, one or two sentences.
Only one.
Yes. We're already over time. I think this can go another hour, but
the reason one of the reasons we like you and we adore your work and your team with Grady and everyone with working for the AC. we truly, as the company, as myself, we truly believe in the European and American values. So this is the reason we support Atlantic Council in Turkey program. And we are doing great things. I mean, thanks for the report as well, because these things should be discussed. And the reason after this report, and thanks for putting it in a very good way, I think we're going to take this one further. And I was suggesting, Charles, that we should look at what's going to happen in 1 year, right? I mean, what we have achieved, what has been changed, because the world became so fastly changing. Everything is changing all the time that probably in 1 year we'll see so many different things. And I'm very happy about this partnership. Let's work on these different agenda items in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ebru.
And thanks to my fellow panelists. It was very nice.
My thanks as
Mark,
well
yeah.
to everyone here, to the council, particularly to Grady, for helping me get here after quite an absence from Brussels. But no, I think I've said this before to you, Daphne. We've said for years and years. I've said for years and years that there's always a huge potential, still remains a huge potential for U.S.-Turkey cooperation in the commercial area. I think we are now in a changed situation, like it or not. So I think this is a moment where it's potentially very, very lucrative for both sides to try to redouble efforts to find new ways to cooperate. So I'm hoping this does kick off more of a conversation on how to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I think we're in a time of great disruption, but with disruption comes opportunity. We've already broken out of some of the molds that have happened in the past, and maybe the ingrained habits that we've developed over the decades. Arguably that's over. That's disrupted, and it's really a moment to seize the opportunity to do some of the things we've been trying to do and take advantage of the fact that everything is a little bit up in the air right now.
Thank you.
I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. Yes, there's more work to do. We have our work cut out to go into the detail of different sectors, pull out different opportunities. So next time we can launch this in Ankara.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And no need to say, just as Atlantic Council of the United States, we attach a lot of importance to intellectual independence work and reports, and the report that Charles drafted is an independent report, and I strongly urge you all look at it.